At this stage, the tables have all been set up in Microsoft Access. In other words, I've gone through the import process from Microsoft Excel, and each table now exists in Access. So the first table that was imported, I think, was the patient table. So if we open the patient table, we can see that there's the 8 patient records there. And for each patient, we have the correct column names and so on. So if we want to look at the patient table a bit further, this is called datasheet view, where we can view the data that's in the table. But if we wanted to add another column to the table or check the data types of a column in a table, etc., we can flick from datasheet view to design view. And there are a number of ways you can make those switches in Access, flick between the two modes. And the handiest way to do it is you right click here in the patient table and you choose design view instead of datasheet view. So in design view, this is where you can adjust maybe field names if you wish. You could change the field names from maybe F name to forename or S name to surname or whatever. And the other thing you have to bear in mind here is that during the import exercise, sometimes Access might assign a slightly different data type than you intended, perhaps. Okay, so in this instance, we have patient ID is stored as a number, and then under number, the more detailed aspect of that data type can be viewed down here in the bottom of the screen where it says field size. And field size here means, in this case, integer. There's a number of options in this, such as integer or byte, long integer, single, double, replication ID, and decimal. Now, many of those won't really concern you, but you may see cases where, in some cases, a field needs to be a long integer, or it might be a double. So some of the columns in the table that hold numbers of various types might be classified, depending on the circumstances, as either integer, long integer, double. They're the three we might meet most often. Likewise, if you want to see the more detailed properties of the F name field, you just click on it, and its data type here is short text, and here we have the field size. Okay, so in other words, this is Access can allow us have a first name of up to 255 characters, and that's probably excessive. So in our case, I haven't looked at the data for a few minutes, but I think maybe the longest forename we have here is about maybe 8 characters. So we'll say that everyone has a forename less than 8 characters. We'll just make that rule for the moment. So we can dictate that. And then there's other properties here which you'll hear more about later on, such things as default values, validation rules, validation text, and required. Okay, so we won't change any of those in a minute, but we'll come back to them maybe in a later screencast. So that's the way you can look at the details of each column in each table and examine its data type and size and other properties and change them if you wish. So I need to save I've made some slight changes there, so I need to make sure they're saved. And the way I'll do that is by hitting the close button, and Access prompts me to save the changes to the design of my table. So I'm changing its structure or layout. I could add in extra columns here if I wished, if I needed to add more details about each employee, and so on. But I'll leave it as it is for the moment. So I'm going to save that. So it reminds me I've made changes, and I've made one of them a shorter size. And the trouble here is if some of my sample data, so I've made the F name field size 8 as opposed to 255. So if some of my sample employees had forenames of 9 or 10 or more characters, then reducing it to 8 would be troublesome because there'll be a little bit of the name chopped off at the end. So that's an issue you have to bear in mind when you're dictating or determining field size. So I'm going to continue anyway. I think I'm safe enough in this case. So I'll just look at the patient table again and see, do all the patients look okay? They do. All their details are fine. So in fact, the longest forename I have here is names like Laura and Katie. They are 5 characters long. So I could have, rather than reducing it to 8, I could have actually reduced it to 5. If a person on your database never had a forename longer than 5 characters. So 8 is probably, it'll catch most people. It'll be adequate for most people or most patients, but there may be people who have longer names than that. So you have to bear in mind, what might be the future. what names are, say, prevalent in that particular area, and is 8 characters adequate for a forename, and it probably isn't. Okay, similarly with surnames, addresses, and towns, their default size at the moment are all 255. So again, if we go back into the database, we'll go back into the table and view the go to design view, and if you go down, we'll say to town, like F name earlier on, it's short text, and its size here is also 255. So I can probably make that about 12 for the moment and get away with it. So you have to, I said, bear in mind what data may end up on your table, and if the field size is sufficient for that. So that's the patient table looked at. And likewise, you can carry out the same changes with the other tables. So as things stand at the moment, all I have done is imported data into the tables and briefly looked at some of the data types and sizes of the columns or fields in each table. So the thing to note at the moment is, for each table, I haven't anywhere gone near primary keys. Okay, so if I want to set up the clinic ID as the primary key of the clinic table, I would click on the clinic column here on the left-hand side and go up to the primary key button and do that. So then a key symbol appears. But I'm deliberately going to skip that phase for the moment and now look at table relationships in the next video. And then the importance of primary keys will become more clear and more apparent, and hopefully you'll understand it better. So I won't save this change. So all of my tables are still raw in terms of primary keys. None of them have any primary keys. So that'll be the next task. So that's the end of the clip.